Prison isn't therapy. Cats, you lied to me. Prison isn't therapy.
Where's the noisy resignation saying, Mr. President, my oath is to the Constitution of the United States, not you. I quit. I cannot do this. Where's somebody at the Air Force who, when he gets the directive, press the button to kill the 68-year-old grandmother, says, I'm not doing that.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 23 cable stations from Burlington, Vermont to New York City. On the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We begin in Connecticut. A trans woman has been put in prison indefinitely. The Department of Children and Families say it's the only way to control her violent behavior. Yet critics say it's an outrage that a person not convicted of any crime has been put in prison, and that the DCF should be able to think of some other way to deal with her behavior and her life. We cover a demonstration in Hartford, then to Yale Law School for a talk by Bruce Fein, who talks about how our liberties are being undermined and calls for resignations and defiance.
When Cats moves into attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back! When Jane Doe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back! When Jane Doe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back! When DCF moves into attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back!
Haven't been square dancing in a while.
Stand up, fight back!
Stand up, fight
Stand
back.
up, fight back!
I can't hear you!
Stand up, fight back!
Stand up, fight back!
You lied to me! Prison isn't therapy! No, Cats! You lied to me! Prison isn't therapy! Cats! You lied to me! Prison isn't therapy!
Okay, so here's a message from Erin Romano. Having suffered abuse at the hands of those entrusted to care for her, she now awaits the court to free her. Jane's spirit has been kept up by the nationwide support and love extended to her by those who attended rallies, marches, and wrote letters. We urge the governor to intervene and secure her release so that she be provided with the support and therapy she so desperately needs. Finally, we are still searching for foster families within the state who would be willing to care for her. The legal team continues to work tirelessly and will never give up until she is free, until we are assured DCF will never use the statute again. Jane, the Mandela of the trans community, speaks for children without a voice, children locked up in adult prisons all over the country, and the plight of transgender people across the nation who demand equality. Everyone who is present at this rally should look around. There are hundreds and thousands like you who demand justice and equality. We must never give up the fight. What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
Case of Jane Doe in Connecticut. I found out about it through a trans advocacy group on Facebook, so this was all kind of, it was news to me. What had happened is that Jane Doe is a 16-year-old transgender girl.
I'm going to ask you a real dumb question.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay. Yeah, so transgender means that Jane was born male. She, however, identifies as female, which means that from birth, she had, mannerisms of a woman, dressed as a woman, presented herself as a woman, was socialized to be female. And this is something that, just to be clear, is not a choice. This isn't really, a lifestyle decision that people make. We're told, what gender we are and what roles we're supposed to occupy in society, and that doesn't necessarily fit everybody. And being trans is, it's not, a fetish or cross-dressing or anything like that. It's, an actual legitimate feeling that, you are not the gender that you were assigned in your body. So for example, I'm trans, People told me I was a girl. I never acted like a girl. I was, always doing masculine things, and I don't identify with the female body that I was given.
And so now back to this case.
Back to this case. Jane Doe is a 16-year-old transgender girl. She was abused by family members early on in her childhood. She was also, her family also had issues with drugs, stuff like that. She was removed from her family and put into DCF care around the age of 5. And when I say DCF care, she was, kind of shuffled from home to home. While she was under the care of these different foster homes, before the age of around, I believe, 12, she was assaulted, she was sexually abused. DCF has said that, they treated her as female, which means that they referred to her by female pronouns and stuff like that. But in other senses, these DCF workers saw her as somebody that they could exploit, abuse, capitalize on. When Jane was about 12, she was sent to various, facilities under the DCF system where she was further abused by DCF workers. She was sexually assaulted by DCF workers. She was forced.
You know that for a fact?
Yes. This is all written in her affidavit, which you can find online. She outlines the whole thing. Her lawyer knows all the details of this case. She was sexually abused, assaulted by DCF workers. She was prostituted. She was exposed to a number of traumatic incidents. There was an altercation between Jane Doe and a DCF worker in Massachusetts where she was staying at a facility. The person came up behind her, grabbed her in kind of an illegal embrace. She fought back because she was triggered. Having a history of trauma, people like Jane and Jane herself are going to act out violently, when they are triggered by remembering those past instances of abuse. So what happened was, she was violent. She was violent against this worker. However, she's a youth. Many DCF youths are assaultive. They do engage in this behavior because they are traumatized. The difference is that, Jane was not charged with a crime. She was simply just seen as being something that, the DCF workers couldn't handle, even though they created this problem of trauma by, those sexual abuse and the physical abuse. So she fought back, and it was deemed then that she was, too unsafe to be kept in the same residential facility as other girls. At this point, and this is where, Malloy and Katz get murky on the details to kind of, keep us guessing. But it is known that Katz's next step was to attempt to place Jane in an adult male prison, where she would be exposed to people who were not her gender, and people who, in prison, survival is about, intimidation, assault, stuff like that. This is, not to put a stigma against prisoners, but this is the way of life. This is survival in the prison system. So what happened was Katz threatened to move her to a male prison. This was fought against by Jane's lawyer. Katz then decided to put Jane in solitary confinement in a woman's prison. It's an adult prison. She hasn't been charged with a crime. She's 16 years old. Katz keeps threatening to keep her there until she's 18. Governor Malloy has moved her from one part of the York Correctional to another. He put her in a cottage, which I guess is supposed to sound nicer than prison, but it's still prison, on York Correctional. She's still being kept in solitary confinement.
You say solitary. No one is allowed
to visit her.
How does the state justify that?
They have said they haven't really. They've said, oh, well, she's too dangerous to be, around other people. And there's also, laws against allowing juveniles to interact with the adult prison population. So they put her in an adult prison, yet they're keeping her in solitary because, I guess,
But I mean, solitary.
I'm not really quite sure about why, but the point is that she's in solitary confinement. She's been there for over a month, and the state feeling like they can't find anything to do with her. They're not creating a place for her to thrive. They're not even giving her mental health treatment.
Especially after
Okay, we're kind of rushed for time, so my last question is, a lot of people said on the chance, let her be free. I mean, what do you literally mean by that?
So what I literally mean is that, you know, realistically speaking, right now Jane Doe needs mental health. You know, she's suffered a lot of psychological trauma. Our demand is that she's given the actual mental health assistance that she needs. So the idea is, you know, we just want to get her out of prison. She needs a family that'll take care of her, but before that, she needs, you know, she needs help with her trauma, with her mental issues. She needs to be in a place where her gender is affirmed. If that's a mental health facility, you know, maybe that's where she needs to be, but prison is not the answer.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! Sin justicia no hay paz! 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 Thank you, Candace.
Attorney Bruce Fein spoke at a Yale forum on whistleblowers in April. He is a former Associate Deputy Attorney General in the Reagan administration, but also a good friend of Ralph Nader, who introduced him at the meeting.
The future of the country rests in your hands. It's not some third force spontaneous combustion. Remember Ralph Waldo Emerson. History is biography. And it's up to us to change the trajectory of this nation, which is headed to ruination. Probably within 30 years, we will have one branch government. We will all be reduced to vassals, to edicts and decrees issued by the president. There'll be no oversight by Congress. We'll be dwindling in our ability to project military force in every square inch of the planet. And it's our job to try to save the country from destruction. And we are obliged to do that because the freedoms that we enjoy today in this very room are because those who sacrificed at Valley Forge, Cemetery Ridge, Omaha Beach, and otherwise. And if they can make those sacrifices, we can make the sacrifices of giving up some creature comforts, giving up some relaxation, to be civic-minded people in defense of one thing, the Constitution of the United States and its philosophical premises. And those are in complete disrepair. The fundamental principle upon which this nation was founded, which separates civilized peoples from savages, is that it is better to be the victim of injustice than to be complicit in it. In other words, a rejection of the 1% doctrine that says if there's a 1% risk someone abroad may be a danger, we kill them, or we destroy them, and inflict all the injustices that can be imagined in the name of safety. And to bring that point home, let me describe to you a hearing that was held in Congress about 3 months ago by Congressman Alan Grayson of Florida. Now, he invited to testify a 9-year-old grandchild from Pakistan who, about a year earlier, was picking vegetables with her 68-year-old grandmother when buzzing above was a drone, caused darkness like Wuthering Heights, and then noise, and then she heard a scream, according to her testimony to Congressman Grayson's committee. She began to run. She was frightened. She said she ran as fast as she could away. Looked at her hands. They were bloody. She grabbed her hands to try to stop the blood from flowing. They didn't stop. Her grandmother was dead. That act I would call of assassination murder, that was committed by the government of the United States of America, under authority that's open and notorious. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only instance where predator drones have killed innocent civilians. I spoke to a friend yesterday whose wife is over in Pakistan regularly providing hospital aid, and she described how a lawyer Jirga there was in the community she was helping, and a predator drone came and killed 40, 50 people, elders. You may recall several years earlier, there was a teenage son of Anwar al-Awlaki who had the audacity to think when his father left to walk out and try to visit him, And when Mr. Alaki was vaporized by a drone, although he was not under indictment, he had not been accused of any crimes. He probably had been recruited earlier by the FBI, but that remains a secret, perhaps for the reason why they wanted to kill him rather than have a trial. He was sitting, having dinner with 5 relatives, and a Predator drone comes and kills him. That's or acts of the United States of America. Again, pursuant to authority that is open, notorious, known to you, to me, to Congress, everyone in the United States. It's not secret. And this is an authority that's been ratified by the Office of Legal Counsel, where I worked at one time studying what were impeachable offenses. It says that the President of the United States is endowed with vastly more authority than King George III, who's a pauper with claiming power. This president has authority to kill anyone on the planet, play prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner, if he in secret decides that the target of the Predator drone, or could be another instrument of death, it doesn't have to be a Predator drone, is an imminent threat to the United States national security. Now, that decision is not subject to review by Congress. It's not subject to review by courts. It's not subject to review by the American people. It is limitless. Now, if you're trying to describe tyranny in better terms than that, try again. This is the authority to kill anyone on the planet that he wishes on his say-so alone. Now, I remember reading history that we overthrew a king that was said to be tyrannical for denying us the right to jury trial. You know? I mean, that's a luxury. No jury trial here. You just get vaporized. And we're complacent. We wrote in the Declaration that when the acts of a government evince a design to reduce its citizenry to absolute vassalage, there's not only a right, there's a duty to replace that government that's more a trustworthy steward of our liberties, our unalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Not a right, a duty. Think of the architecture of law, if you want to call it law, it's lawlessness, under which we reign today. And go back to this fundamental principle of civilized living. It's better to risk being the victim of injustice than to risk being complicit in it. And we have flipped that principle. And we need to change it. It needs to change with you and with me, and actively addressing members of Congress, the executive branch, petitioning, holding demonstrations against this utterly arbitrary, despicable exercise of uncabined authority that we should never entrust to anyone. And why anyone would wish to exercise the power is beyond me. I walk in front of the White House every day to work, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and I look over on the right-hand side in the Oval Office, and I'm thinking, on Tuesdays, the President of the United States writes down on his list who gets to live or die. This is not Thomas D. Torquemada. This is the President of the United States. And we sit there and complacent. If that is not an impeachable offense, then all of my work defining impeachable offenses under President Nixon is worthless. You may recall that he was voted to be removed from office by the House Judiciary Committee. The House voted the articles, but it became moot because he resigned for obstructing justice, right? For ordering the burglary of Daniel Ellsberg, psychiatrist. You know, a burglary, and that's nothing compared to assassinations. For misusing agencies of the United States, for failing faithfully to honor his oath, to uphold the Constitution and faithfully execute the laws. Those were impeachable offenses. And I remember at that time, serving at the Justice Department, we all were imbued with the idea where one oath was to defend the Constitution, not President Nixon. I got calls, others got calls from the White House, will you come over and defend the President? No. Our oath is the Constitution. And I can vividly remember right now that day, Elliot Richardson, when he resigned, he refused to fire Archibald Cox, The whole Department of Justice filled that auditorium and gave him the loudest ovation in the history of Washington, D.C. This was the rule of law, the high water mark, the finest hour of every attorney in the Justice Department, and they still remember that. That's what law was like. And it wasn't just the lawyers. That day of the Saturday Night Massacre, many were saying it's like the burning of the Reichstag. Because when Cox was fired and Elliot Richardson and Ruckelshaus resigned, they sealed the special prosecutor's office. The FBI did, so it was going to shut down the investigation of the president. This is the burning of the Reichstag. There were 2 million telegrams came in. Speaking, that dates me, no one does telegrams today, from citizens saying, that is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. It was the people who forced the Watergate hearings. It wasn't something that the Congress initiated. And when the people heard about the burglary of a psychiatrist's office, said, no, we still believe there's a Fourth Amendment that protects people in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. His national security claims were worthless. We even had a CIA director. His name was Richard Helms, I spoke with years later, who was asked by President Nixon shortly after the break-in, well, can you claim that if we trace the money, we'll expose CIA assets in Mexico? And Richard Helms said, no. And he was replaced soon thereafter by James Schlesinger. That's a CIA director. Compare that today. The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. March 2013, he's asked under oath by the Senate Intelligence Committee member Ron Wyden, who is a friend of mine, by the way, are you collecting data on millions of Americans? His answer, no. Well, what was really happening was that he had been collecting telephony metadata since May of 2006 on every single domestic and international call every American made, with no exceptions. Members of Congress, Supreme Court justices, lawyers, doctors, priests, penitents, everybody. So it's sort of more than a kind of a Scrivener's error to say no, that he's not collecting data on millions of America. He collected more data than's ever been collected in the history of mankind. And what was the response? Well, President Obama promoted him. He was going to do an internal investigation to see whether reforms were appropriate. And what about Congress? I mean, that's not an impeachable offense to lie under oath, to mislead the American people? Nothing. He's still serving. We have as our Director of National Intelligence, who's entrusted with secrets about us, a known perjurer, remains in office, untarnished, public reputation there. Where's all the newspapers calling for his resignation? Silence. Again, I bring this up because you should be frightened between the difference today, this docility, the timidity, the acquiescence and lawlessness, and what Watergate was about. Even somebody who was a scoundrel like John Dean went to the Oval Office and said, there is a cancer on the presidency. Even he could not stomach paying bribes to the Watergate burglars, throwing out internal investigative papers of the FBI. John Dean. Where's the John Dean today? Where's the noisy resignation saying, Mr. President, my oath is to the Constitution of the United States, not you. I quit. I cannot do this. Where's somebody at the Air Force who, when he gets the directive, press the button to kill the 68-year-old grandmother, says, I'm not doing that. I will not comply with a clearly illegal order. Where's that person? Nowhere. And I'm disinclined to do this at this venerable institution, but you have somebody here on your faculty named Harold Coe. He used to testify with me against all these limitless executive authorities, military commissions, and he's the legal advisor to Hillary Clinton, and he defends lawlessness in Libya. Oh yeah, you can just go to war without authorization from Congress, that the predator drone program is okay, because the person who decides who gets killed is really conscientious. And he knows that because he was told if he kills the wrong person, he's going to be like Lady Macbeth and try to wipe out that spot, that damn spot. That shows he can be trusted. There's no quitting? Don't you think people know that their obligation is to the Constitution, not the incumbent? That's our system. Remember what was said in Germany under the Third Reich? Well, the military took a salute to Der Führer. It wasn't to Germany anymore. That's that system. We're different. We subscribe to the rule of law, especially government lawyers, more than even the private lawyers. More than even the private lawyers. Silence is unbelievable. And then what about the legal profession? You all in the audience who are going to be lawyers. As Ralph said, the silence is incredibly depressing. We're the ones who are supposed to be the stewards of liberty, the stewards of the system. Because if the system breaks down, we've got nothing to do. It's like being a lawyer in Red Square. I had a little bit of acquaintance with that. Jesselyn maybe as well, dealing with the lawyer who purported to represent Ed Snowden, Anatoly Kucherino. He was appointed by, I think his name was Vladimir Putin. Right? He didn't really have too much independent judgment about what went on. The lawyers aren't supposed to be that way in the United States. Last Friday, I spoke to a group out at George Mason University. These were graduate students, and after the address, which was on NSA surveillance, I had an opportunity to speak with a Pakistani lawyer, a woman. Spent 2 years in the forefront of bringing President Musharraf to justice, out of office for his tyranny, which was quite a bold thing. If you're a woman and a lawyer and know how to read in Pakistan, that's dangerous. You risk getting acid thrown in your face. Even if you're a teenager, you risk having someone pull a gun out on a bus and shoot you in the head. And she was stunned here at the docility, the passivity of her cohorts. Said, what's wrong with these people? All of them would say, well, they're bad people, it's not affecting me, I need to indulge my creature comforts, eat, drink, be merry, tomorrow we die. I mean, is that the spirit of Valley Forge? Is that the spirit of 1776? We would even be a country separate from Great Britain if that kind of passivity prevailed. So what is to be done? They're not simple answers. If we're trying to prepare a strategy of success, because everything in life is contingent. But we have 100% control over our motivations. Even if our goals and objectives fall short, we have 100% over why we're doing things. And I would suggest why everyone in this room should be doing things is to try to save the Republic for our posterity. It should guide all of your decisions. You only ask one question. You decide your professional fate otherwise. Is it the right thing to do to preserve the Constitution and liberty in the United States? All other questions at present are secondary. All other questions at present are secondary. And that is the message that I would leave you. You want to make your experience here and afterwards to stand in the history of the United States as the finest hour of the legal profession. Thanks.
At the end of this month, Jeff Halper from the Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions will be speaking 4 times in Connecticut. That committee talks about the Israeli officials who refuse to give Palestinians permits to build homes on their own land. And when inevitably they do so anyway, how thousands of them lose their homes to bulldozers. Go to our website, thestruggle.org, for information about times and dates. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.